Dad, what are you doing here? I just couldn't help but shout because there he was. Dad, lying in the scorching sun in the backyard, inside a broken old tea, like the ones I remember from my childhood. Don't worry about it. It's the usual thing. Dad's weak response left me speechless. Living in the family home, Dad had injured his leg and was now staying with my brother, Stephen, and his wife. Stephen always said Dad was doing fine, and his daughter-in-law Mia would laugh, assuring me she was supporting him. I was told Dad was too busy making new friends at the hospital and enjoying life to stay in touch, especially with his struggles with technology. But seeing Dad so weak and exhausted in front of me, I realized Stephen's words were a lie. Dad slowly raised his hand, pointing towards something. There was I, a single office worker living in the city but dreaming of working in a resort hotel. I moved away from my parents' urban home to live alone in the countryside. My parents, Tanner and Rose, were in a car accident 2 years ago. Only Mom passed away. Dad injured his leg in that accident and was deeply depressed from losing Mom. Dad and Mom, always together, were known as lovebirds in the neighborhood. Dad, an inner person, would travel regularly with Mom, who loved trips. They had the accident on the way back from a trip, and Dad survived alone, constantly lamenting, "Why did I survive and not Rose?" His leg injury and the loss made him retreat further indoors. With my job, I could only do so much in terms of home care. I felt guilty seeing Dad so down, but thankfully I had my younger brother Stephen living near our parents' home. Stephen and his family occasionally checked in on Dad. "Dad's gotten quite weak," I said. "Well, they were lovebirds, it's understandable. We live nearby, so Elena, don't worry and focus on your work," Stephen responded. When I thanked him, Stephen said, "Recently, the recession has really hit our income. We need to start saving. How about you, Elena?" he said with a laugh. "That's tough. Thankfully, the hotel is doing well with the return of international tourists. I have been extremely busy lately with lots of overtime," I said. I had a lot of overtime, but that also meant extra pay, so I wasn't struggling financially. In fact, I have received a raise and believe I'm earning more than most of my peers. The challenging part, however, is the lack of personal time. Stephen had never spoken about financial troubles like this before. He mentioned they have been cutting back on food expenses, nearly reaching their limit every day. He hasn't bought new clothes in over a year and obviously hasn't been able to travel. They wanted to start a family, but even just the two of them were struggling to make ends meet, so having children wasn't an option right now. As I worried about how desperate their situation might be, Stephen said something while we were at his house. "Dad's leg has gotten much worse and he needs some help. We're thinking of living together to take care of him." Mia, sitting next to Stephen, chimed in, "We figured it's a good way to save money and look after Tanner too. It's like killing 2 birds with 1 stone." I replied, "That's really helpful. Please let me know if there is anything I can do to assist." I expressed my thanks then and there. "Thanks. Keep up the good work, Eleanor," Mia said happily. So Stephen's family decided to move in with Dad for caregiving and to save money. Dad and Stephen hadn't always been close. Stephen often stayed out late, and Dad frequently scolded him during his student days. They barely spoke after Stephen graduated and stopped visiting the family home. I rarely saw Dad and Stephen talk as adults, so Stephen's willingness to live with Dad surprised me. It was easy to guess they were struggling financially. I know how significant saving on rent and living expenses can be, living alone as I do, but I honestly felt anxious about whether they would provide proper care since I couldn't visit often due to work. I regularly call Stephen. "How's Dad doing, Stephen?" "He is starting to smile a bit more these days. Is caregiving enough?" "Sorry to leave it all to you," Stephen responded. "It's been 3 months since we started living together. We're getting used to it initially. I felt relieved that Stephen's family seemed dedicated to supporting Dad, allowing me to focus on my work. Years passed, and after summer ended, I decided to visit my parents' home for the first time in years. To invite surprising them, I called Stephen. "Hey, Stephen, it's been a while." "Oh, long time no see. How are you? Think you can make it home this year?" Stephen's cheerful voice reassured me. "Yeah, work's finally settled down. I'm thinking of visiting for a couple of days." "That's right. Drive safely coming back." "Thanks. Let Dad and Mia know too." I couldn't reach Dad on the phone, so I told Stephen and then returned to our parents' room for the first time in years. Hey, Stephen, it's been a while. Oh, long time no see. How are you? Think you can make it home this year? Stephen's cheerful voice reassured me. Yeah, work's finally settled down. I'm thinking of visiting for a couple of days. That's right. Drive safely coming back. Thanks. Let Dad and Mia know too. I couldn't reach Dad on the phone, so I told Stephen and then returned to our parents' room for the first time in years. This was the longest I had ever been away from the family home since Mom passed. I worried about Dad and tried to visit as much as I could. But knowing Stephen's family was living with him and being really busy with work, I hadn't visited in years. The family home in the city felt even hotter than where I lived. Thinking about the continuing heat wave, I finally arrived, sweating profusely. Then I saw a broken tent in the front yard that I didn't recognize. Was this tent always here? Curious, I approached the tent, but sensing someone inside, I rushed into the house. I'm back, Onar. Welcome back. You look so pale. What happened, Mia? Surprise colored my ashen face. I think someone is in the tent, I hastily reported to Mia, who had greeted me. Then, Mia responded with something unexpected. Oh, that? It's Tanner, Mia answered calmly. What? Dad in a tent on such a hot day? I hurried to check inside the tent. There, Dad was lying down as if he had collapsed. Mia, I'm calling an ambulance. Dad's completely out of it, I said urgently. No need for an ambulance, Mia shouted louder than usual, insisting not to call one. It's Tanner's wish to live in the garden. He's fine, Mia said, something that didn't make sense. Dad wilted on a hot day, wanted to live in the garden? Would Dad, always an indoor person, say something like that? I don't remember him ever taking us camping or to the beach. Even when Mom was healthy, he always said the coolest place in summer was indoors, and the warmest spot in winter was in front of the heater. There is no way Dad would want to spend time outside on such a hot day. I felt something was terribly wrong. I rushed to the tent where Dad was and spoke to him. Dad, what happened? Are you okay? Oh, Eleanor, it's nothing, just the usual. I'm fine, Dad spoke weakly. Do you live out here every day? Why didn't you go inside? I asked Dad, and he slowly pointed to a specific place in the house. It was Dad's room, actually. Since I started living with the Stevens family, they have forced me to live in the closet, Dad revealed. In the closet? I thought they were taking care of you devotedly, I said in disbelief. They never took care of me devotedly. It was just cohabitation for their savings. I kept saying no to the closet because my leg hurts. Then they said if you're going to be selfish, live outside, and they threw me out in the yard with this broken tent, even though it's still hot. Dad continued with stories. I wished I could shut my ears. Stephen and Dad were never going to get along well. I blamed myself for trusting Stephen. Mia wasn't the type to provide devoted support either. I remembered Stephen complaining about her drinking and coming home drunk in the morning after they got married. They don't cook and eat out every day. Taking care of Dad was obviously too much for them, and yet I was foolish to have hoped. This is too much. Don't worry, I'm here now. I was shocked to learn how horribly Dad had been treated by Stephen's family. The phone calls made it sound like they were caring for him devotedly, but they actually forced him to live in a closet and then threw him outside. Unforgivable. A fierce anger welled up inside me. Ignoring Mia's words, I called an ambulance. I said there's no need for an ambulance, don't make a big deal out of it. Mia desperately tried to stop me, but I ignored her words. The ambulance arrived and Dad was taken abroad. I joined him. Dad was close to having a heat stroke, but thankfully his life wasn't in danger. However, due to a lack of proper nutrition and being left in unhygienic conditions, he had to be hospitalized. Dad, rest easy and get some rest, I said to him. Eleanor, you saved me, Dad replied. I was prepared to join Rose every day. His face showed relief. What are you talking about? You've got a lot more living to do, Dad. Thinking that Dad had been living each day as if it were his last, I almost burst into tears, but I kept a bright smile in front of Dad. I went back to our parents' home to gather Dad's belongings for his hospital stay. Stephen, Mia, let's make sure you understand what's happened with Dad. I confronted them about their treatment of Dad. We just acted badly because we hoped Tanner would leave, Mia confessed casually. Yeah, surprisingly stubborn, didn't want to leave at all, Stephen said nonchalantly. They both seemed aware they were treating Dad terribly. They laughed mockingly as they talked about their harsh treatment, intended to drive him out. Do you realize what you're saying? It's good he's still alive, but if something had happened, you would be criminals, I said, outraged. That's an exaggeration. We fed him and checked on him once a day, Stephen said, treating his father like an animal. He's being hospitalized because he wasn't given proper food. What do you think of Dad? It's his house, and you're trying to kick him out, I said, my anger boiling over. Stephen and Mia showed no remorse and started making excuses. We didn't want to live here. We chose to move in because of financial troubles, but caregiving was harder than expected, Stephen said. Mia added, That's why we tried to put him in a facility. But Tanner really hated the idea of leaving this house full of memories with Rose. They even tried to kick us out, Stephen said, portraying themselves as victims. They wanted to kick Dad out, but when it looked like they might be the ones to leave, these schemes to make Dad want to leave instead. Living rent-free is a big deal for poor people like us. We couldn't let ourselves be kicked out, Stephen said. I never thought they would stoop so low as to degrade Dad's care and living conditions to monopolize the house. I knew Dad and Stephen were close, but I believed that as a mature adult in his mid-30s, Stephen would handle things better. The idea of such a vile scheme was frightening. Moreover, Stephen confessed they locked Dad in the closet and threw him out to make Dad choose to live with me instead of them. Country living is better for health. We were planning to send him to live with you in the countryside, Stephen said. He was more resilient than we thought. We were surprised he didn't leave before you came, Mia said, laughing as if reminiscing about old hardships. Now that Eleanor is back, Dad will probably say he wants to live with her, Stephen said, laughing in a mocking tone. Then, Stephen said something outrageous. Now that Dad's in the hospital, the house is ours. Pack his things and leave. I was speechless at their audacity to have the nerve to say such things while living in someone else's house. I gathered Dad's belongings and returned to the hospital. Dad, I heard everything from Stephen. You've been through a lot, Dad said. I tried to kick them out, but it backfired. The house is my treasure with Rose. I couldn't give it to them. Dad's endearing love for Mom was heartening. Don't worry about the house, I'll take care of it. How about living with me after you're discharged? Dad happily agreed. Thank you. I would love to live with you, Eleanor. After securing Dad's agreement to live with me, I returned home. 2 months later, countless calls came from Stephen. There are a lot of strangers in the house. What's going on? Although Stephen sounded furious, I didn't respond and handed the phone to someone else. The person I passed the phone to was Mom's dad, Grandpa. Hey, Stephen, I've heard everything from Eleanor. Seems like you've treated my dear son-in-law terribly, Grandpa said. Stephen sounded utterly shocked. Our parents' home was actually built by Grandpa in his younger days as a wedding gift for Mom. He had always been fond of Dad like his own child. When I told Grandpa about the whole fiasco, he was furious. He sent several of his strong apprentices to evict Stephen and his family. After the incident, I immediately called Grandpa, the owner of the land and the house. Grandpa, always imposing, was someone even Stephen had always feared. I knew he could handle the situation, so I asked for his help. Stephen, all your stuff has been arranged to be sent to Mia's parents' home, Grandpa said. Don't just go ahead with things, Stephen protested, though still fearful. A man who treats his wife like that has no right to complain. Do you have any objections? Grandpa said sternly. No, I'm sorry, Stephen said, and didn't talk back. After that, Grandpa was always kind to me, a woman, but very strict with Stephen. I remembered how Grandpa used to spank Stephen for crying when we were kids, telling him, "Don't cry, be a man." Well, his normal discipline in the past is now considered taboo. Watching Stephen like that, I felt grateful to be born a girl. Stephen, who had once defied Dad, never showed that side to Grandpa. Even now, he tried to resist a little, but Grandpa quickly took control. Stephen and Mia's belongings were all sent to Mia's parents' home, as Grandpa had arranged. Stephen and Mia arrived at Mia's parents' home. Dad, I think our stuff has arrived, so we came to get it, Mia said. Mia's dad, Kendrick, came out from the back room. I've heard the whole story from Eleanor. Stephen and Mia, you'll be living here with us now, he said. Stephen replied, We'll live at my parents' home. It's fine. Don't think you can come back after doing such things to your father. I'll straighten out your twisted characters, Kendrick said angrily. I knew Kendrick was a very strict man. I had gotten Mia's parents home contact details from Dad and explained everything to them. Mia and Stephen were then forced to live there and receive strict discipline. Mia was taught to cook from scratch and had to prepare 3 meals a day for the family. Stephen obtained permission from his company to work a side job and helped Kendrick with his work on the weekends. After Dad was discharged, Grandpa informed him that the house had deteriorated and needed repairs. Determined to fix the house full of memories with Mom, Dad worked hard on his rehabilitation and recovered. You did great with the rehabilitation, and doctors were even surprised by your recovery, I said. Of course I had to fix the house I shared with Rose. I can't let my spirit falter, Dad said with a brightness reminiscent of his younger days. His love for Mom seemed to be driving his recovery. Under Grandpa's guidance and with the help of his apprentices, the house was gradually repaired. Dad fixing the house seemed to regain the sparkle he had when Mom was alive. Dad, you seem so lively when I fix the house. Memories come back, and it feels like I'm talking to Rose. I used to think she was far away, but maybe she's been protecting me all along. Hearing Dad speak like this nearly brought me to tears. Perhaps Mom really had been protecting him all this time. Eventually, the hazardous repairs were completed. Once satisfied, Dad decided to let go of the house. Dad, are you sure about this? Yes, I feel like Rose is saying it's okay to let go now. I want someone to live in this beautiful house we fixed up. He spoke calmly. I think Mom would be happy about that. Thanks to Dad's and Grandpa's efforts, a buyer was quickly found. With the sale proceeds, Dad and Grandpa decided to move into retirement homes. I started visiting more often. Dad, how are you? I'm having a great time every day. Made lots of friends thanks to you, Eleanor. He smiled happily. Dad seemed to be enjoying his days with the other residents. I began cherishing time spent with my dear Dad more, living each day peacefully. As for Stephen and Mia, we're getting used to Dad's discipline, and it's comfortable in its own way, Mia said. Yeah, it's not always straight, and the house is big and great, Stephen added, seemingly content. Being free from caregiving is actually a blessing, Mia said happily. We're living a good life despite low income. Thanks to that, Stephen acknowledged. Stephen and Mia, accustomed to living at Mia's parents' home, were happy to be relieved of caregiving duties and showed no signs of remorse. Enraged by their lack of repentance, Kendrick eventually kicked them out. You show no sign of reflection. It's time for you to leave, he said quietly but angrily. Wait, Dad, pack your things and leave right now. Kendrick dismissed their excuses and expelled them. Having relied on their comfortable life at the parents' home, they had saved nothing, spending all your money each month. Suddenly homeless and at odds, they set up a worn-out tent in a park to live in until they could afford a place. It's cold. It's all Stephen's fault for his low income that we have to live like this, Mia blamed. The tent is from my parents' home, but I bought a new sleeping bag, so stop complaining. Besides, I'm working 7 days a week with no days off, Stephen retorted irritably. All the money he had earned from his side job was already spent. How about we contact Eleanor and ask to live with her in the countryside? Mia suggested nonchalantly. Let's give her a call, Stephen agreed without objection. They called me and endlessly told me about being thrown out of Mia's parents' home and their current life sleeping rough in a cold park. Stephen, who had once ridiculed my real lifestyle, was now begging to live with me. Unable to bring myself to help someone who had treated Dad so horribly, I, of course, refused to invite further nuisance. I blocked all their future contacts. I could only hope that they would learn that what you do to others often comes back to you.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? Is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. "Meetings should be for employees only." Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike, Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.